What's up, Senders? I want to talk about what may be one of my favorite bikes of all time. I want to talk about the 2022 Orbea Rise Carbon.
Dr. J, what are you doing? I thought this was a mountain bike channel.
Oh, what's up, Randy? Yeah, it is a mountain bike channel. What do you mean?
That is a dirt bike.
No, it's an electric mountain bike.
Even if it is, it's still stupid. That's a 2022. The 23s are out, you idiot. Don't you watch Pink Bike?
Definitely aware that the 23s are out. I'm actually going to be making some comparisons.
I thought you were like a physical therapist. I thought you were into fitness.
Yeah, I'm definitely into fitness. I'm into fitness e-bike in the back of my van so I can go and smash 5 times as many laps as you. You're just jealous, Randy.
So
Indeed, the 2023 Carbon Rise has been released. It's not really out in the wild yet. Hoping to get my hands on one for testing soon. I still want to bring you this long-term review because I've loved this Gen 1 so much. I still think that you can extrapolate much of what I'm going to talk about to both the existing aluminum models, which are also super cool, but also to the 2023 Carbon new version. That 2023 model still has the same exact geometry as this Gen 1 sitting behind me. And we will be talking about some of the key differences and upgrades that you would get if you want to hold out for one of the 2023 versions. Here are my thoughts. Orbea released the Rise as a lightweight electric mountain bike back in 2020. The market was actually relatively thin in selection at that point. They were early adopters, and in my humble assessment, they were way ahead of their time. That segment of the market has definitely grown. There's a lot more competition, there's a lot more choices, but I personally still feel like even this Gen 1 Rise is still super pertinent in that lightweight electric mountain bike market. Orbea developed the Rise around what they called the RS, or the Rider Synergy concept. They took a Shimano EP8, which normally has 85 Newton meters of torque. They tuned that down to 60 Newton meters of torque in aims to give it a much more natural ride feel. They wanted the Rise to not only be super lightweight, but to have a feel that would be much more familiar to an actual mountain biker. If you've ever spent time on full power e-bikes, they are super awesome, but they can be a little bit torquey, meaning it can kind of feel a little bit unnatural, especially if you've been a long time mountain biker. They wanted this EP8 RS to be much more natural feeling, and that if you get into the cranks in a more aggressive way, then it gives you more aggressive output from the motor. Whereas if you're just sort of barely spinning along, then it's barely giving input, which I can attest really does play out well on the trail. It has a very natural feel. If you want to get in the gas, it definitely gives you more assist. And in addition to having that different tune in the motor, the overall bike is actually much lighter. Mine weighed in right at 40 pounds, which at the time was a whopping 10 pounds lighter than the nicest full power e-bike that I'd spent time on, which was the new version of the Santa Cruz Heckler. And I can assure you that 10 pounds minimum, many full power e-bikes are much heavier than that. Those 10 pounds really yielded a much more natural ride feel. This has been the first e-bike that I've ever spent a lot of time on that I felt like I could actually manual, bunny hop, wheelie, and just sort of hop around the trail in a much more playful way that's much more familiar to a regular trail bike. And it probably would not come as a surprise that you can actually ride the Rise without the motor assist at all. I don't necessarily recommend that, but I've ridden this one literally several miles with no assist whatsoever. And I can tell you that it's definitely doable. And I think it just speaks to how natural feeling of a bike the Rise is. So we'll swing back around to my overall ride impressions of the Rise, but I want to first break down the fact that mine obviously is built different than stock. I want to talk about why I made the changes that I made. Those will tease out a few of the negatives or knocks that I have on the Rise, but it'll also allow me to discuss some of the improvements of the 2023 version. Some of the changes that I made have been personal preference. In that category would be the change in suspension, running the 2023 RockShox Lyric Ultimate, and I also decided to put a coil shock. I put the new 2023 RockShox Super Deluxe Coil Ultimate. Ran that on a few bikes now, and it is playing out ridiculously well on the Rise. And it just helps the bike feel a little bit more capable of holding its line through chattery rough sections at higher speed. And also in the personal preference category, this came stock with a race face, super lightweight carbon bar, in a 20 mil rise. That thing was ridiculously stiff, but it had a bit of a low rise, and I actually felt like it was too stiff, more hand fatigue, more forearm pump. So I put my preferred 1UP Carbon in the 35 rise. The rise came stock with an E13 crankset, which is fine. It was in a 175 millimeter length. A 2010 is calling and they want their crank arm length back. I chose to spec the rise with the 5 dev components trail cranks made for the EP8 in a 155 millimeter length. I tried my best to tell a difference in power and performance, and to me it was all benefit, no negative to running those super short 155 millimeter cranks. Those cranks are bomb proof. They're actually really lightweight for what they are. And to me, the aesthetics are on point. So my rise is a size large. It came spec'd with a 150 mil dropper post. I was easily able to fit a 1UP 180 slammed all the way to the frame. It's both a lighter post, noticeably longer drop. To me, that's all benefit, no negative. And it's a little thing, it's a touch point, but the physique saddle that came on this was just really not good. I actually let several people try it. Pretty much everybody said that it felt like you were sitting on a rock, so I put a tried and true WTB Volt on it. And then lastly, it came stock with a dissector up front. To me, it's a negligible weight penalty to step up to something like a DHF with the max grip, which is exactly what I did. That gives a noticeable improvement in grip over that stock dissector. And then a quick other things that were a little bit annoying on this Gen 1 Carbon Rise that are all supposedly improved on the 2023 Rise. To start with, the Shimano EP8 motor, it rattles. So basically, anytime that you unload the cranks and you're not actively in load, there's free play or movement in the cogs of the motor, and it causes a rattle. I generally don't think about it when I'm going down the trail. The good news is Shimano just released the EP801. Preliminary reports are suggesting that that noise has been eliminated or significantly reduced. Another knock on the Gen 1 Rise for the Carbon, where they sought to keep this as a minimalist electric bike. They chose to put a little junction box in line with the motor cable routing coming from the front of the bike. It's super annoying because it's never pointed in the right direction, and it's hard to differentiate which mode that you're in. It's just only indicated by color. You have no indication on how much battery you have left. It goes from green to red. There was no in between. It's just green, and then with a few miles left only, it goes to red. Cool thing, looks like the 2023 Rise actually has a nice controller that appears to have more options. It looks way more sleek, and that actually integrates the cable into their version of carbon bars, which also seem to have an option for a 30 mil rise. So much of the complaints that I would have with this bike have actually been improved or updated on the Gen 2. And so that gets me into just the general ride impressions of the Rise. You can see I've basically built it bigger, which if you follow the channel, I'm prone to doing. I put a more aggressive front tire, I put a little more aggressive suspension. I've not mentioned this yet, but I also put an offset bushing in one of the rear shock eyelets. That actually slackens the head tube angle by 1/2 degree. So it should be sitting at about 65 degrees even. That really helped take some of the edge off from those steeper descents. Did not seem to negatively impact the cornering or the handling. Didn't seem to overly drop the bottom bracket, but that is a nice way just to get a little added capability. But this gets me into why I consider the Rise one of my favorite bikes of all time. If you're someone that's had a lot of different mountain bikes, have you ever had a bike that when you're riding it down the trail, you're actually not thinking about the bike? You're thinking about how much fun this trail in front of you is. For me, that has been the Rise. It feels so natural on this bike. It corners well, but is also so ridiculously capable. The handling on the Rise is so good. I think part of that is it's a little bit more conservative geometry. Even with my slackened head tube angle, it's still sitting at about 65 degrees, which definitely makes it a much better all-arounder for just your average trail riding situations. But it's still super capable when the trail gets rough. This has been the first e-bike that I've had that you feel like you can dance it around the trail. You can bunny hop over logs, you can manual into obstacles. and it doesn't feel like you're having to put maximum effort and all of your energy to get that done because it's this big, heavy, full-powered e-bike. It has one of the most active but also one of the most supple suspensions that I've felt in a long time. When you get this thing in rough sections of trail, it really just does a nice job of soaking up all the little features and obstacles you come to while still being relatively supportive. And because of that, I feel like I've been able to just get this bike so dialed in how it feels and how it rides. And although it's marketed as a lightweight e-bike, it has blown my mind at how capable of a bike this is. There's really no riding that I would personally do where an e-bike would be appropriate that I wouldn't be willing to take the rise as I've got it set up. Taking it off some big drops, I've taken it down some relatively big for me jump lines, and I've never felt like the bike was what was holding me back. And so that's a good segue into talking about the range. I've had rides where I went out with buddies on full power e-bikes and we were getting pulled around super, super hard. On those rides, I could get about 20 miles of range. On rides where it's a little bit mellower terrain or we're not trying to keep a breakneck speed, I can pretty consistently get about 24 to 26 miles. And that's all with the 360 watt hour battery and no range extender. And so I feel like for your average trail user who's just gonna go out for an hour and a half to 2 hours after work, that 360 watt hour battery is actually more than enough to go and have an absolutely good time on. I have seen a few days where if you're going to take it to a bike park and you're going to try to get 30 miles in, you may very well run this thing out, which is also a point worth mentioning about the 2023 Carbon version, that it's now offered in both configurations. You can get it still with that super lightweight 360 watt hour battery, or you can up it to the same battery that's actually already been coming in the aluminum versions, which is a 540 watt hour battery, and you can still get a range extender. So there's a few different options. I feel like if you are an absolute minimalist, you want to use a lot of your own power, you're not going to be doing much more than 2.5 hour rides, you may actually still prefer, if you're going to look at a 23 version, that 360 watt hour battery. Whereas if you're someone that's really eyeballing 3+ hour rides, why not go ahead and consider that 540 watt hour battery? You can even get a range extender even on that, which will give you over 800 watt hours of something that is coming in way lighter than bikes that come with that size battery. Orbea are claiming that the new carbon frame is actually lighter than this Gen 1 frame, so there would be actually some offset to upgrading to that 540 watt hour battery. And to be frank, I think if I were gonna order a new one of the Gen 2s, the 2023 version, I think probably for me personally, I would go ahead and get that 540 watt hour battery. I don't think that the weight penalty would not be worth having that added range and that added security so that you could very confidently, at least for me personally, exceed that 30-mile range pretty consistently. So should you upgrade if you have the Gen 1 Carbon Rise to the new 2023 or Gen 2 version? I'm gonna have to say I think that Orbea were way ahead of their time with this Gen 1 Carbon Rise. I think that is absolutely fantastic bike, that there shouldn't be a huge rush to upgrade if you already have this bike. But certainly if you're someone that's already put a lot of use on yours, you're looking to upgrade to the latest greatest, the two most upgradable things for me personally would be getting rid of that motor rattle on that Shimano EP8 to go to the new EP801, and also looking at that extended range 540 watt hour battery. You'll have to ask yourself, are those upgrades worth it? But again, I think that this one is absolutely fantastic. Should you upgrade if you have the aluminum Rise? The aluminum Rise is super, super awesome. It is coming in at a price point that a lot more people can afford. It is absolutely great. I have ridden both. You can tell somewhat of a weight difference, but it is not insane, and I would simply say to that, get the one that your budget will allow. If you can swing for a carbon one, I do think that there's a noteworthy difference, but not enough to overextend yourself or just to not get one if you can only afford the aluminum one. So there you have it. Tried to lay it all out there for you. This has been one of my favorite bikes that I've ever owned. Been able to push my skills and go and just have some of the most enjoyable rides that I've ever had. Getting to explore new trails or areas of trail that I wouldn't normally try to hit on a regular bike. It's just been a super fun experience for me. If you're looking for an e-bike, you're wanting an all-arounder, I cannot see why you would not put the Orbea Rise on your radar. Hope you found this helpful. Please consider subscribing to the channel. As always, thanks for watching.